The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the cemetery as Zara Clarke kneeled before her husband's grave, her trembling fingers arranging wildflowers against the weathered headstone. Tears threatened to spill but wouldn't come. They hadn't for months. 3 years of Sunday visits hadn't diminished her grief, only transformed it into something harder, a stone lodged permanently in her chest. "I brought your favorite today, Thomas," she whispered to the silent grave. "Purple asters. Remember how they used to grow wild behind our homestead?" Dakota Territory, 1878, was unforgiving to a widow of 26. Zara had learned that lesson with brutal clarity. The small town of Pine Ridge had its share of good folk, but even their kindness couldn't fill the emptiness that followed her like a shadow. The evening breeze picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Zara shivered, drawing her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She should head back before darkness fell completely, but these stolen moments with Thomas were all she had left. "Mrs. Clarke?" The deep voice startled her. Zara turned, one hand flying to her throat. A tall man stood several paces away, hat in hand. The dying sunlight outlined his broad shoulders and caught in his dark blonde hair. His stance was respectful, not too close, giving her space in her grief. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said. I noticed you here every Sunday. Thought you might want some company today." Zara recognized him vaguely, one of the ranchers from outside town, Quinn Armstrong, if she recalled correctly. She'd seen him in the general store and at church occasionally, though he typically sat at the back and left before the social hour. "I prefer to be alone," she replied, her voice stiff with practiced reserve. He nodded, a flash of understanding crossing his weathered face. "Of course, madam. My apologies." Instead of leaving, however, he moved to a nearby grave, knelt down, and removed his hat completely. To her surprise, he bowed his head in silent prayer. The simple, unexpected act left her momentarily transfixed. The silence stretched between them as the last crimson streaks faded from the sky. Finally, curiosity overcame her reluctance. "Who are you visiting, Mr. Armstrong?" she asked softly. He glanced up, seemingly surprised she'd spoken. "No one in particular, madam, just paying respects." "To a stranger's grave?" A sad smile crossed his face. "No one should be completely forgotten." Something about his words, or perhaps the gentle way he said them, touched a place in Zara's heart that had been numb for too long. She looked back at Thomas's headstone, tracing the engraved letters with her fingertips. "My husband," she offered. "Thomas Clarke, 3 years ago. Pneumonia." Quinn Armstrong nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Clarke." "Thank you." They fell silent again, the growing darkness wrapping around them like a blanket. Eventually, Zara rose to her feet, brushing dirt from her black skirts. "I should return home before night falls completely." "May I walk you into town?" he asked, standing as well. Her instinct was to refuse, but the path back was growing darker by the minute, and the cemetery sat on the outskirts of town. Practicality won over pride. "That would be appreciated, Mr. Armstrong." They walked side by side down the dirt path, the first stars appearing overhead. He kept a respectful distance, his stride measured to match her shorter one. "I've seen you at Thornton's General Store," she said, breaking the silence. "Yes, madam. My ranch is about 5 miles west. I come in for supplies every couple of weeks." "Armstrong Ranch," she recalled. "You raise horses, don't you?" A note of pride entered his voice. "Yes, madam. Quarter horses mostly. Started with just 3 mares and a stallion 6 years ago." "And now?" 23 head, including this year's foals." Zara nodded, impressed despite herself. Building a successful ranch in this territory took determination and skill. "You must work very hard." "It's a good life," he said simply, "though sometimes a lonely one." The honest admission hung in the air between them as they reached the edge of town. Lamplight spilled from windows, and muted piano music drifted from the saloon 2 streets over. "My home is just there," Zara said, gesturing toward a small white house with blue shutters. "Thank you for walking me back, Mr. Armstrong." He replaced his hat, tipping it slightly. "My pleasure, Mrs. Clarke. A good evening to you." She watched him stride away, his tall figure soon swallowed by the gathering darkness. Only then did she realize he'd never explained why he'd chosen today, of all days, to join her in the cemetery. The question followed her into her empty house, lingering even as she prepared for bed. It had been so long since she'd had a real conversation with anyone beyond pleasantries and business. Thomas's death had built walls around her that no one had managed to scale, or perhaps no one had tried hard enough, until today. As Zara extinguished her lamp, she found herself wondering if Quinn Armstrong would return next Sunday. The following week brought unseasonably warm days and the steady rhythm of work that structured Zara's life. She kept busy with her seamstress duties, finishing a wedding dress for the banker's daughter and beginning alterations on winter coats before the cold weather arrived. When Sunday came, she hesitated before leaving for the cemetery, taking extra care with her appearance, pinning her auburn hair more neatly than usual, and choosing her blue dress instead of black. She told herself it was simply time to set aside full mourning, nothing more. The afternoon sun was high when she reached Thomas's grave. She knelt as always, arranging fresh flowers and clearing away fallen leaves. But today, her usual one-sided conversation faltered. "I met someone last week, Thomas," she finally said, feeling strangely guilty. Not like that, just a neighbor being kind, but it was nice to talk to someone. A shadow fell across the grave, and Zara looked up to find Quinn Armstrong standing nearby, hat already in hand. "Mrs. Clarke," he greeted her. "I hope I'm not intruding." "No," she said, surprised at how true it felt. "Not at all." He settled beside her, leaving appropriate space between them. From a satchel, he produced a small bunch of wildflowers and laid them at the base of Thomas's headstone. The simple gesture left her momentarily speechless. When she found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "That's very kind, Mr. Armstrong." "Quinn," he said, "if you don't mind." "Zara," she offered in return. He nodded, then bowed his head. Quietly, almost under his breath, he began to pray. Not the formal prayers of Sunday service, but something more personal, asking for peace for those gone and strength for those left behind. Zara closed her eyes, letting his deep voice wash over her. When was the last time someone had prayed for her, specifically? She couldn't remember. When he finished, they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. "May I ask about him?" Quinn finally said, nodding toward the headstone. Normally, Zara avoided speaking of Thomas. The memories were too painful, too private, but something about Quinn's respectful inquiry made her want to share. Thomas was a carpenter, the best in 3 counties. People would commission pieces from as far as Rapid City. Pride colored her voice. "He built our home himself, every cabinet, every chair. His hands were always moving, creating something." Quinn listened attentively, his expression open and interested. "You were together long?" 7 years married. We met when I was 17. He came to repair our barn after a storm. My father was impressed with his work ethic." A faint smile touched her lips at the memory. "I was impressed with his smile. And he was clearly impressed with you." Zara looked down, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. "We were happy, planning for children when he fell ill. The fever took him in less than a week." "I'm sorry," Quinn said, the simple words carrying genuine empathy. "That's a hard thing, losing someone so suddenly." She glanced at him, curious. "Have you lost someone, Mr. Quinn?" A shadow passed over his face. "My parents, when I was young, and my brother in the war." "The war between the states?" He nodded. "Joseph was 4 years older. Joined the Union Army in '63. Made it almost to the end before Appomattox." "I'm sorry," Zara echoed his words. It was a long time ago now. But the pain in his eyes suggested otherwise. Zara recognized it well, grief that aged but never truly departed. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, reminding them both of the passing time. Quinn stood first, offering a hand to help her up. Zara hesitated only briefly before accepting, noticing the calluses that spoke of hard ranch work. "May I walk you home again?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." As they walked, Quinn spoke of his ranch, the new foal born just days ago, the challenges of the coming winter, his hopes for expanding next spring. Zara found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about horse breeding and the local markets. "You know quite a bit about ranching," he observed. "My father raised cattle on a small scale, nothing like your operation, but enough that I learned the basics." "What happened to the land?" Zara's expression tightened. "My brother inherited it when father passed. He sold it and moved east 2 years ago." "Leaving you alone," Quinn said, the statement carrying understanding rather than pity. Thomas had already gone by then. One more loss hardly seemed to matter. They had reached her house, the white picket fence gleaming in the fading light. Quinn stopped at the gate, making no move to come closer. "Would it be too forward if I called on you sometime this week?" he asked. "Perhaps Tuesday evening?" The question caught Zara off guard. Her first instinct was to refuse to retreat behind the safety of her solitude, but something in his steady gaze made her reconsider. "I suppose that would be acceptable," she heard herself saying. "Around 7? A genuine smile broke across his face, transforming his serious features. "7 it is. Good evening, Zara." "Good evening, Quinn." She watched him walk away, a strange fluttering in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love or even attraction, just the unsettling realization that her carefully constructed isolation had been breached, and more surprisingly, that she didn't mind. Tuesday arrived with unexpected nervousness. Zara changed her dress twice, finally settling on a green calico that Thomas had always said brought out her eyes. She prepared a simple apple cake and set out her mother's teacups, then felt foolish for the effort. It was only a neighborly visit, after all. At precisely 7, a knock sounded at her door. Quinn stood on her porch, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and his best waistcoat. His hair was damp from a recent washing, and he held a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Good evening," he said. "Thank you for allowing me to call on you." "Please come in," Zara replied, gesturing him inside. He handed her the package as he entered. "Just a small token." Curious, Zara unwrapped it to find a book of poetry. Tennyson, leather-bound and well-kept. "It was my mother's," Quinn explained. "You mentioned on Sunday that Thomas used to read to you in the evenings. I thought perhaps—" The thoughtfulness of the gift left her momentarily speechless. "This is too precious to give away," she finally said. "Not giving away lending," he corrected with a gentle smile. "Good books should be read, not left on shelves." Zara ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "Thank you. I'll take excellent care of it." She served tea and cake in her small parlor, acutely aware of how Quinn's large frame made the furniture seem delicate by comparison. Their conversation moved easily from town news to childhood memories to books they had read. "How did you come to ranching?" Zara asked as she poured a second cup of tea. Quinn considered the question. "After the war, I drifted for a while, worked cattle drives in Texas, breaking horses in Colorado, saved every penny until I could buy my own place." "Why Dakota Territory?" A smile touched his lips. "The land reminded me of home, of Pennsylvania. The same big sky. And it was far enough from everywhere that a man could start fresh." "Were there things you needed to leave behind?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "No, it's a fair question." Quinn set down his cup. "Nothing scandalous if that's your concern. Just ghosts. Memories. The war changed a lot of us who fought in it." The haunted look that briefly crossed his face told Zara more than his words. She'd seen that same expression on other veterans who passed through town. "How about you?" he asked, changing the subject. "Have you always lived in Pine Ridge?" "Since I married Thomas, yes. Before that, my family's farm was about 20 miles north." "Do you like it here?" The simple question gave her pause. Did she like Pine Ridge? She'd never really considered it. It's home, she said finally. Though sometimes I wonder what it would be like to live somewhere else, somewhere with more possibilities. What kind of possibilities? Zara shook her head, suddenly embarrassed. It's foolish. I doubt that, Quinn said with gentle encouragement. She hesitated, then admitted, I've always wanted to see the ocean. Thomas promised we'd go someday. The wistfulness in her voice revealed how unlikely that dream now seemed. Quinn nodded thoughtfully. The Pacific is something to behold. Different from the Atlantic, wilder somehow. You've seen both? The Atlantic during the war, the Pacific some years after when I worked briefly in San Francisco. Envy and admiration mingled in Zara's response. You've lived quite an adventurous life. Parts of it, he acknowledged, though lately I've come to appreciate quieter days. Their conversation continued until the mantel clock struck 9, surprising them both with how quickly the time had passed. I should go, Quinn said, rising reluctantly. You've been most hospitable. At the door, he paused. Would it be presumptuous to ask if I might call on you again, perhaps Saturday afternoon? Zara found herself nodding before she'd fully considered the question. I'd like that. After he left, she sat alone in her parlor, the house suddenly seeming emptier than before. The book of poetry lay on the table where she'd placed it, a tangible reminder of the connection forming between them. For the first time in 3 years, Zara fell asleep thinking about someone other than Thomas. Saturday brought Quinn back to her door, this time with an invitation to ride out to his ranch. I have a gentle mare that would suit you, he said, but only if you're comfortable with the idea. Zara hadn't been on horseback since before Thomas died. The prospect was both exciting and intimidating. I'd like that, she said, surprising herself again with her willingness. The ride west took them through rolling grasslands, already turning golden with autumn. Quinn pointed out landmarks along the way, a creek that never ran dry, a stand of cottonwoods where deer gathered at dusk, distant hills where he sometimes spotted wild horses. Armstrong Ranch appeared on the horizon, a modest but well-built house, a large barn, and several corrals where horses grazed peacefully. It's beautiful, Zara said sincerely as they approached. Pride was evident in Quinn's voice as he responded, It's not much compared to some, but it's mine. Paid for free and clear last spring. He showed her around the property, the barn with its neat tack room, the blacksmith's forge where he did his own shoeing, the vegetable garden that provided much of his food. Everything spoke of careful attention and hard work. In one corral, a mare and her foal approached the fence, curious about the visitor. This is Penny, Quinn said, stroking the chestnut mare's nose. And her son, not yet named. Zara reached out cautiously, smiling when the foal stretched his neck to investigate her fingers. He's beautiful, so delicate yet strong. That's the miracle of them, Quinn agreed, watching her with the horses. Powerful enough to work all day, gentle enough to carry a child. They spent the afternoon with the horses, Quinn patiently explaining his breeding program and his hopes for expanding to Army contracts. Zara found herself captivated, not just by the animals, but by the passion with which he spoke of his work. You must get lonely out here, she observed as they sat on the porch later, drinking coffee. Quinn looked across his land, considering. Sometimes. Winter evenings are the worst when the snow piles up, and you don't see another soul for days. No thought of hiring help? Can't afford it yet. Maybe next year, if the spring sales go well. He glanced at her. What about you? Does your house feel empty? The directness of the question might have offended her from someone else, but Quinn's genuine interest made it easier to answer honestly. Every day, she admitted, especially at night. During the day, I can keep busy enough with sewing and household tasks. But evenings? That's why the books, he said with understanding. Zara nodded. They're company of a sort. Different voices in an empty room. As the sun began to lower, Quinn saddled their horses for the return journey. The ride back to town was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they reached her house, Quinn dismounted first, then helped Zara down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment they stood close, closer than propriety strictly allowed, before Quinn took a respectful step back. "Thank you for coming out to the ranch," he said. "It was good to show someone, to share it with someone who understands its value. Thank you for inviting me. It's a special place." He nodded, suddenly appearing uncertain. "Zara, I've enjoyed these days with you." "As have I," she replied softly. "I'll see you tomorrow? At the cemetery?" "Yes," she promised. "I'll be there." That night, Zara stood before her mirror, studying her reflection with new eyes. The woman who looked back at her seemed different somehow, less shadowed, more present. She touched her cheek, wondering if others could see the change in her. For the first time since Thomas died, she found herself thinking of the future as something other than an endless repetition of lonely days. Sunday afternoon found them both at the cemetery as promised. This time, Quinn brought a blanket for them to sit on and a basket containing bread, cheese, and apples. "I thought perhaps we might stay longer today," he explained, "if that's not inappropriate." Zara considered what the town gossips might say about a widow picnicking in the cemetery with a bachelor. Then she decided she didn't care. "It's not inappropriate," she said. "Thomas would have approved of food and conversation. He never believed mourning should mean isolation." They shared the simple meal after their prayers, talking quietly about their lives, filling in the gaps of understanding between them. Quinn spoke of his war experiences, not the battles themselves, but the long marches, the camaraderie, the moments of unexpected beauty found even in dark times. Zara told him about her childhood on the farm, her mother who taught her to sew, her dreams of someday having children of her own. "Do you still want that?" Quinn asked carefully. "A family?" The question stirred complicated emotions. "We did. After Thomas died, it seemed the dream died with him." She looked up at Quinn. "But lately I've wondered if perhaps some dreams just wait for the right time to be reborn." Something shifted in his expression, hope mingled with caution. "Zara, I've been meaning to ask you something." Before he could continue, hoofbeats approached riders coming up the cemetery path. Quinn stood, instinctively positioning himself between Zara and the potential threat. 3 men appeared, well-dressed but with hard expressions that suggested trouble. Zara recognized the one in front, Bernard Walton, the banker whose daughter's wedding dress she had recently completed. "Mrs. Clarke," Walton called out, his tone falsely cordial. "And Mr. Armstrong, what a surprise to find you here." Quinn nodded stiffly. "Mr. Walton." "Interesting place for a social call," Walton continued, his gaze shifting between them. "People might talk." "We're paying our respects," Zara said firmly, standing to join Quinn. "As I imagine you are?" Walton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Though I must say, Mrs. Clarke, your mourning period seems to have lightened considerably in recent weeks." The implication was clear and cutting. Before Zara could respond, Quinn spoke, his voice controlled but with an edge of steel. "Mr. Walton, I'm sure a man of your standing understands the value of kindness to those who have suffered loss. Mrs. Clarke has shown me that same kindness by allowing me to join her in remembering those we've lost." One of Walton's companions shifted uncomfortably, but the banker himself seemed unmoved. "Indeed," he said dryly. "Well, don't let us interrupt your remembrances. Good day to you both." The men rode on, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Quinn turned to Zara, concern evident in his expression. "I'm sorry about that. I didn't think—" "It's not your fault," Zara interrupted. "Bernard Walton has always considered himself the moral authority of Pine Ridge. His opinion matters very little to me." But despite her brave words, they both knew the encounter had changed something. The peaceful afternoon was disrupted, the outside world intruding on their private communion. They packed up the remains of their meal in tense silence. As they walked back toward town, Quinn finally spoke again. I never meant to cause you any difficulty. You haven't, Zara insisted. Walton isn't the only one who will talk, he said grimly. A widow and a bachelor spending time together, people will assume things. Let them assume. Zara stopped walking, turning to face him directly. Quinn, these past weeks have been the first time I've felt truly alive since Thomas died. I won't give that up because of narrow-minded gossip. The intensity of her declaration surprised them both. Quinn searched her face, seeming to find something that resolved his doubts. What I was trying to ask earlier, he said quietly. Would you consider coming to the harvest dance with me next Saturday? The harvest dance was the biggest social event of the season. Everyone in town would be there. Attending with Quinn would be a public declaration of something. Friendship at minimum, perhaps more. Yes, Zara said, her heartbeat quickening. I would like that very much. The week that followed buzzed with preparations and whispers. Zara felt the stares when she visited the general store, noticed the conversations that halted when she entered the post office. But alongside the disapproval came unexpected support. Mrs. Thornton from the general store, slipping extra candies into her package, Reverend Peterson stopping her outside church to say how pleased he was to see her rejoining life. For the dance, Zara unearthed a dress she hadn't worn in years, deep blue silk with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and collar. She spent hours altering it to fit her slightly thinner frame and updating the style to something more current. On Saturday evening, she pinned her hair up with her mother's pearl combs and allowed herself a touch of rose water at her wrists. The woman in the mirror looked flushed, expectant, beautiful, in a way she hadn't felt in years. Quinn arrived precisely on time, dressed in a formal black suit that transformed his rugged appearance into something distinguished. The appreciative warmth in his eyes when he saw her brought color to Zara's cheeks. You look, he began, then seemed to struggle for adequate words. Like springtime after a long winter. The poetic sentiment touched her deeply. Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself. He offered his arm, and they walked together toward the town hall, where lanterns already blazed and fiddle music spilled into the street. Heads turned as they entered, conversations pausing momentarily before resuming with increased vigor. Ignore them, Quinn murmured, his hand steady at the small of her back. I'm trying, she whispered back. They made their way through the crowd, stopping to exchange pleasantries with those who approached. Some, like the Thorntons, were genuinely welcoming. Others, particularly Bernard Walton and his circle, offered only cold civility. The dancing began, and Quinn led Zara onto the floor. Despite his size, he moved with surprising grace, guiding her confidently through the patterns of the Virginia reel. As they danced, the stares and whispers receded from Zara's awareness, replaced by the simple joy of movement and music. You dance well, she said during a brief pause. My mother insisted all her sons learn, he replied with a smile. Said no Armstrong boy would embarrass her at social gatherings. She taught you well. They danced 3 more sets before stepping outside for air. The October night was crisp, stars brilliantly clear above them. Quinn draped his coat around Zara's shoulders, the weight and warmth of it enveloping her like an embrace. Are you enjoying yourself? He asked, a touch of concern in his voice. More than I expected, she admitted. It's been a long time since I danced. You were missed at these gatherings, Quinn said. Several people have told me so tonight. Yet you never attended them either, from what I hear. He looked sheepish. Not much for crowds generally. Prefer open spaces to packed rooms. Then why tonight? His eyes met hers, serious and intent. Because you'd be here. The simple honesty of his answer stole Zara's breath. Before she could respond, the doors to the hall opened, and several couples spilled out, laughing and talking. The moment of privacy was gone. They returned inside for the supper break, sharing a table with the blacksmith and his wife, who treated them with easy friendliness. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself relaxing, even enjoying the sense of community she'd denied herself for so long. When Quinn escorted her home close to midnight, they walked slowly, reluctant for the evening to end. "Thank you," Zara said as they reached her gate, "for convincing me to attend. It was healing in a way." "I'm glad." Quinn hesitated, then asked, "May I call on you again tomorrow afternoon?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I'd like that." He took her hand then, raising it slowly to his lips for a gentle kiss that sent warmth spreading up her arm. "Good night, Zara." "Good night, Quinn." Inside, Zara stood with her back against the closed door, her mind replaying the evening, the dancing, the conversations, the way Quinn's eyes had followed her movements with quiet appreciation. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt fully seen as a woman, not just as a widow. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Quinn arrived the next afternoon bearing a small bouquet of late wildflowers. His smile when she opened the door held a new confidence, as if the previous evening had confirmed something important for him. "I thought we might walk by the river," he suggested. "The cottonwoods are turning gold." They strolled through town and out along the riverbank, where autumn had indeed transformed the landscape into shades of amber and gold. Few people were about, giving them a sense of privacy despite being in the open air. "I've been thinking," Quinn said after they had walked in comfortable silence for some time, "about what comes next." "Next?" Zara asked. He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Zara, I need to be clear about my intentions. These weeks with you have meant more to me than I can properly express." Her heart quickened at the seriousness in his tone. "When I first saw you in the cemetery, I was drawn to your quiet strength," he continued. "I've come to admire your kindness, your intelligence, your courage in facing loss. I find myself thinking of you constantly when we're apart." Zara's breath caught. "Quinn, please, let me finish." He took her hands in his. "I know it's soon. I know you may not be ready. But I want you to know that my feelings for you are genuine and deepening every day. I don't expect an answer now, but I hope you might consider a future where we face life's joys and sorrows together." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Zara looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the carefully restrained hope. "I've been so afraid," she whispered, "afraid to feel anything again, because feeling means risking loss, and I wasn't sure I could survive losing someone else I loved." Quinn nodded, understanding in his expression. "I know that fear well. But these weeks with you," Zara continued, finding courage in his steady gaze, "you've helped me remember that life is meant to be lived fully, not just endured. I'm not ready to make promises yet, but I'm not afraid anymore to see where this path might lead us." Relief and joy transformed his face. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Quinn leaned down. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning a whispered possibility rather than a demand. When Zara responded, raising her hand to his cheek, the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of things to come. When they finally parted, both were breathing quicker, eyes bright with emotion. "I should probably take you back to town before I forget myself entirely," Quinn said, his voice rough. Zara laughed, the sound surprising her with its freedom. Perhaps that would be wise. They walked back hand in hand, no longer concerned with who might see them. At her gate, Quinn kissed her once more, then reluctantly bid her good evening. That night, Zara stood before Thomas's portrait in her bedroom. For 3 years she'd spoken to it nightly, keeping him present in her life. Now she studied his familiar features, the kind eyes, the slight smile that had always made her feel loved. "I think you would like him, Thomas," she said softly. "He's a good man, honorable, kind." Her fingers touched the frame gently. "I'll always love you, but I think perhaps my heart is big enough to love him too." No answer came, of course, but as Zara prepared for bed, she felt a sense of peace settle over her, as if, somehow, Thomas understood and approved. The weeks that followed brought a deepening relationship between Quinn and Zara. Their Sunday meetings at the cemetery continued, but now they also spent time together in town, at her home, and at his ranch. Quinn began teaching Zara to ride again, patiently helping her rebuild her confidence on horseback. November brought the first snow and preparations for winter. Quinn worked tirelessly to ensure his livestock had adequate shelter and feed stored for the cold months ahead. Zara found herself helping when she could, enjoying the partnership that was developing between them. One frigid afternoon, as they sat by the fire in Quinn's cabin after checking on a pregnant mare, he broached a subject they'd been circling for weeks. "Winter's setting in early this year," he said, watching her face carefully. "The passes will be difficult soon." Zara nodded, warming her hands around a cup of coffee. "The old-timers say it's going to be a hard one." "I've been thinking," Quinn continued, "about how isolated the ranch becomes in deep winter. Last year there were 3 weeks when I couldn't make it into town at all." Understanding dawned on Zara. They had grown so close, the prospect of weeks without seeing each other was difficult to contemplate. "That would be challenging," she agreed. Quinn set his cup down, moving to kneel before her chair. He took her hands in his expression serious, but eyes bright with hope. "Zara Clarke, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Every day with you makes me certain of what I want for our future." He squeezed her hands gently. "I love you. I think I've loved you since that first Sunday when you trusted me enough to tell me about Thomas." Tears blurred Zara's vision, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Quinn, will you marry me?" he asked simply. "Be my wife, my partner in everything? Share my home and help me build a life together?" The question hung in the air, momentous yet somehow inevitable, the natural progression of what had been growing between them. "Yes," Zara whispered, then more strongly. "Yes, I will marry you, Quinn Armstrong." His face lit with joy as he gathered her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion that had been building between them. When they finally separated, both were breathless and laughing. "When?" Quinn asked, still holding her close. "Spring would be traditional, but before winter," Zara said with sudden certainty. "I don't want to be apart from you for weeks at a time." His smile was brilliant. "Next week? Would that be too soon?" "Not soon enough," she replied, surprising herself with her eagerness. They agreed on the following Saturday. A small ceremony, just close friends in the church where they'd first noticed each other from across the room. Reverend Peterson was delighted when they approached him with their request, offering his blessing and practical assistance with the arrangements. The town's reaction was mixed, some expressing genuine happiness for the couple, others whispering that the widow Clarke had certainly moved on quickly. Zara found she cared less and less about the opinions of those who didn't truly know her heart. On their wedding day, snow fell gently outside the church windows as Zara walked down the aisle in a cream-colored dress she'd made herself, trimmed with lace saved from her mother's wedding gown. Quinn waited for her at the altar, tall and handsome in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. Their vows were simple but heartfelt promises of love, faithfulness, and partnership through whatever life might bring them. When Quinn slipped his mother's ring onto Zara's finger, his hands trembled slightly with emotion. "I love you," he whispered as Reverend Peterson pronounced them husband and wife. "And I love you," she answered, rising on tiptoe to meet his kiss. The small reception at the hotel afterward was warm and joyful, with even Bernard Walton offering grudging congratulations. As evening approached, Quinn and Zara slipped away to begin the journey to their ranch, to their home. The ride was cold but beautiful, snow transforming the prairie into a glittering expanse under the rising moon. Quinn had insisted Zara bring all her personal treasures with them, Thomas's portrait carefully wrapped among them. "He'll always be part of you," Quinn had said when she hesitated, "which means he's part of us now." When they reached the ranch house, Quinn lifted Zara from her horse and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing as he navigated the doorway without bumping her head. Inside, the cabin was transformed, clean and warm, with new curtains Quinn had secretly commissioned from Mrs. Thornton, and a wedding gift of quilts from the church ladies piled on the bed. "Welcome home, Mrs. Armstrong," Quinn said, setting her gently on her feet. Zara looked around at what would now be their shared space, feeling a profound sense of rightness. "It feels like home already." Later, as snow continued falling outside, they lay together in the quiet darkness, Zara's head resting on Quinn's chest, his arms holding her close. "Are you happy?" he murmured against her hair. "More than I thought possible again," she answered honestly. "I want to give you everything, Zara. The ranch, a family, even that ocean you've always wanted to see." She raised herself on one elbow to look down at him, tracing his features with gentle fingers. "You've already given me the most important thing." "What's that?" "A future worth looking forward to." Quinn pulled her down for a kiss that held all the promise of that future, the joys and challenges they would face together, the love that would sustain them through both. Winter passed in a peaceful blur of contentment for the newlyweds. The predicted harsh weather indeed materialized, with blizzards that confined them to the ranch for days at a time. But what might have once been isolation now felt like blessed privacy time to learn each other's rhythms and preferences, to build the foundations of their life together. Zara transformed the bachelor cabin into a true home, arranging her belongings alongside Quinn's, adding feminine touches that he claimed to protest but secretly appreciated. She set up her sewing area in the corner of the main room, where light from the south-facing windows was best, and soon had a steady stream of work from neighboring ranches as word spread of her skill. Quinn found himself wondering how he had managed alone for so long. Having Zara as a partner changed everything, not just the comfort of shared meals in a warm bed, but the deeper satisfaction of shared purpose. They discussed every aspect of the ranch operations, her practical suggestions often improving his plans. By early spring, they had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Quinn would rise first, tending to the morning chores while Zara prepared breakfast. They would work separately through the morning, he with the horses, she with her sewing or household tasks, then share lunch and often work together in the afternoons. Evenings were for planning, reading aloud from Quinn's growing collection of books, and the physical expressions of love that continued to deepen their bond. Neither took this happiness for granted, aware of how precious it was, how easily life could change. As March brought the first hints of spring to the prairie, Zara began experiencing morning sickness. At first, she dismissed it as a passing illness, but after the third day of nausea followed by complete recovery by noon, she could no longer deny the likely cause. She waited until evening, when they sat together by the fire, to share her suspicion with Quinn. "I believe I might be with child," she said, watching his face carefully. His expression transformed from surprise to wonder to absolute joy in the space of seconds. "A baby? You're sure?" "Not completely," she cautioned. "It's early yet, but all the signs are there." Quinn moved to kneel before her chair, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our child," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Zara, Words failed him, and he simply pressed his forehead against her middle, overwhelmed with emotion. Zara stroked his hair, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "I hoped you would be pleased." He looked up at her, incredulous. "Pleased? Zara, this is everything. You are everything." The following months brought changes to their lives as they prepared for the baby's arrival. Quinn threw himself into building a proper cradle, carefully selecting the finest wood and working on it in every spare moment. Zara sewed tiny garments and planned how to rearrange their small home to accommodate a nursery area. They agreed not to share their news widely until Zara was further along, but made an exception for Reverend Peterson, who had become a true friend to them both. His genuine delight and immediate offer of prayers for mother and child touched them deeply. Summer came, bringing with it the visible evidence of Zara's pregnancy as her body changed to nurture their growing child. Quinn found her more beautiful than ever, his protective instincts intensifying as her due date approached. On a warm September evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Quinn asked a question that had been on his mind. "Have you thought about names?" Zara smiled, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "I have. If it's a boy, I was thinking perhaps Joseph, after your brother." Quinn's expression softened with emotion. "You would do that?" "Of course. He's part of your story, which means he's part of our child's heritage." "And if it's a girl?" Zara looked thoughtful. "I've always loved the name Elizabeth. It was my grandmother's name. Elizabeth Armstrong." Quinn tested the name. "It has a good sound to it." "Elizabeth Joseph Armstrong, perhaps, to honor both sides of the family?" Quinn nodded, visibly moved. "It's perfect." As October arrived, bringing cooler days and the first hints of autumn color, Zara's time drew near. Quinn arranged for the doctor from town to stay at a neighboring ranch, close enough to be fetched quickly when needed. When labor began on a clear, cool morning, Quinn maintained outward calm while inwardly terrified. He sent a ranch hand racing for the doctor, then focused entirely on supporting Zara through the intensifying contractions. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her between pains, wiping her brow with a cool cloth. "You can do this." "Tell me about the ocean," Zara requested, as labor progressed, needing distraction from the pain. "Tell me what we'll see when we go there." So Quinn described the endless blue horizon, the rhythm of waves against sand, the cry of seagulls, and the salt tang in the air. He promised they would take their child to see these wonders someday, building a picture of future adventures that carried them through the difficult hours. The doctor arrived just in time for the final stages. As evening approached, Zara's efforts were rewarded with the first cry of their daughter Elizabeth Joseph Armstrong, pink and perfect and loud in her protestations at entering the world. When Quinn held his daughter for the first time, looking down at the tiny face with its wisps of dark hair, he felt a love so overwhelming it nearly brought him to his knees. "She's magnificent," he whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Zara's arms, "just like her mother." Zara looked up at him, exhausted but radiant with joy. "We made this miracle together." "Yes," Quinn agreed, settling beside them on the bed and wrapping his arms around his family. "Together." In the days that followed, they adjusted to the rhythms of life with a newborn, the midnight feedings, the wonder of tiny fingers and toes, the absolute conviction that no baby had ever been as beautiful or perfect as theirs. When Elizabeth was 3 weeks old, they bundled her carefully against the autumn chill and took her to visit the cemetery in Pine Ridge. The Sunday ritual that had brought them together now took on new meaning as they introduced their daughter to the grandfather she would never meet. "Thomas," Zara said softly as they stood before the familiar headstone. "This is Elizabeth, your granddaughter." Quinn stood beside her, one arm supporting her while she held the baby. "She'll know about you," he promised the silent grave. "About your craftsmanship, your kindness, your love for Zara. That's a promise from both of us." Zara leaned against her husband, grateful beyond words for his understanding that Thomas would always remain part of their family story. Not as a rival for her affections, but as the first chapter in a book that continued to unfold in unexpected and beautiful ways. As they walked back toward their wagon, now a family of 3, Reverend Peterson approached them, beaming at the sight of the baby. "May I?" he asked, holding out his arms. Zara carefully transferred Elizabeth to him, smiling as the older man immediately began speaking softly to the infant. "She's a blessing," the Reverend said, looking up at Quinn and Zara, "as is what you've built together." Quinn's arm tightened around Zara's waist. "We know how fortunate we are." "It's more than fortune," Peterson responded. "It's courage, the courage to begin again when life has taken so much from you both." Zara thought about that courage as they drove home, Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in her arms. It had taken courage to open her heart again, to risk loving and potentially losing. But the alternative, a life half lived in the shadow of grief, now seemed unimaginable. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how one simple change, you sitting beside me that Sunday, altered everything." He smiled, reaching over to touch her cheek briefly. "Best decision I ever made, walking over to you that day." "Why did you?" she asked, realizing she'd never questioned his initial approach. "After all that time watching from a distance?" Quinn was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "It was the anniversary of Joseph's death," he finally said. "I was feeling particularly alone that day. Something about the way you knelt there, so dignified in your grief. I felt like you might be the one person who could understand." "And now we're here," Zara marveled, looking down at their sleeping daughter. "And now we're here," Quinn agreed, his voice rich with contentment. Winter came again, but this year it brought joy rather than isolation. The Armstrong home was warm with love and new traditions. Quinn built a small Christmas tree stand, and they decorated a pine with ornaments he'd carved and ribbons Zara had saved. Elizabeth grew rapidly, her personality emerging curious, determined, quick to smile. She brought daily delight to her parents, who found themselves constantly amazed by the miracle of her existence. As spring approached once more, Quinn began making good on his promise to expand their operations. The previous year's full crop had sold well, providing capital for improvements. He hired 2 hands to help with the increased workload, building a bunkhouse for them near the barn. Zara's sewing business thrived as her reputation spread throughout the county. She began specializing in wedding gowns, finding particular satisfaction in being part of other couples' joyful beginnings. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Quinn surprised Zara with a special gift tickets for a train journey to California the following autumn. "The ocean," she breathed, holding the tickets with trembling hands. "You remembered." "I remember everything you've ever told me," he said simply. "Elizabeth will be old enough to travel by then. We'll make it a family adventure." That night, after their daughter was asleep, they stood on the porch together, arms around each other as they gazed up at the star-filled prairie sky. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zara asked softly. "That day in the cemetery, did you ever think we'd come so far?" Quinn looked down at her, moonlight silvering his features. "I hoped," he admitted. "From the moment you spoke to me, I hoped for something I hadn't let myself want in a very long time. And now? Now I know that hope was just the beginning." He kissed her tenderly. "What we've built together is better than anything I could have imagined." Zara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I used to believe that happiness was something that happened to you once, if you were lucky, that when it was gone forever." "And now," Quinn echoed her question, "now I understand that it's something you choose again and again, something you build together, day by day." She looked up at him, love shining in her eyes. "Thank you for teaching me that." "Thank you for being brave enough to learn it," he responded, drawing her closer. Above them, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the night sky, a moment of fleeting beauty that neither missed because they were looking up together, not down in solitary grief. From inside the house came the soft sound of Elizabeth stirring in her cradle. Zara and Quinn exchanged smiles and turned to go in hand, to tend to their daughter, moving forward together into the future they continued to build, one day, one choice, one act of love at a time. And when Sunday came again, they would visit the churchyard as they always did, not in solitude, but as a family united by love that honored the past while embracing all the possibilities that lay ahead.